I love that. Shiva Greg, Poker Queen. I kind of feel like I was. Yeah, I learned a lot of really interesting lessons from playing poker yesterday. Got a couple lucky hands, and that happens in trading too, right? A couple good fills, a couple things go your way, but I had just such a blast. Such a blast. So hope everyone's doing well. New Zealand dollar. Oh, I earned it. It was a lot of fun. I think I played disciplined, and then I didn't. Lots to learn. I guess I wouldn't have learned as much had I actually won. So I guess I should be thankful for that. The not winning was absolutely a wake-up call on a couple different levels for this girl. So I guess in a weird way, when you win, you don't learn much. So hopefully I'll take that loss. I'm a horrible, I shouldn't say I'm a horrible loser. That's not true. I'm very competitive, which is not the same thing. Definitely not. All right, so let's talk about what's going on in these markets. Let's jump into the economic calendar, take a peek at what we've got going on, and I'm going to scroll down to today, February 2. I sent a video out really, really late, or I guess really, really early, depending upon your point of view and your time zone. But I sent a video out basically accompanying the European Open. It's right around 2 a.m., I believe. And looking at the way in which the market digested the Aussie, it looks like we might have a new tomato can. So we're going to talk about our individual currency story ranks, kind of ranking those. So we will talk about that here today. New Zealand dollar, a couple questions about that. What was going on with New Zealand dollar. So who asked about the New Zealand dollar? Oh, John, so what time did you notice that? I'm going to ask you here. We'll do a little sleuthing together. What time did you notice that? Okay, so would you say that was perhaps coinciding? And I'm going to ask you, I'm not telling you yet. What do you think that might have had to do with perhaps a sympathetic reaction from a larger market related to a lot of the issues that, say, New Zealand may be facing? With the RBA statement out there, did you notice it coincided with that? Do you feel it coincided with that? Yeah. So for those of you wondering, when we get central bank events from banks that have a lot of similarities in terms of the different effects on their economy, you will see sympathetic reactions. You will see sympathetic reactions. So when I notice there is an Aussie hot zone, the Aussie economy really dwarfs the New Zealand economy. It's just a different, size and exposure to commodities, different commodities too. But a lot of what Australia will often cite as issues, you will see echoed in the same issues that will face New Zealand, namely China. So which particular pair were you noticing it in? I'm guessing you're probably, you're looking at New Zealand dollar, US dollar, New Zealand dollar, Japanese yen. You can see this here. So drop a vertical line and you can see it, right? You guys can see what John's talking about. Sympathetic reaction there. I just texted my friend that I'm still fairly ticked that I lost last night. And, this is the friend that I go to for, wisdom and level-headedness. And I got a reply of losing sucks. So thanks, Buddha. There we go. All right, so Euro New Zealand, sure. And those are going to be three of our New Zealand dollar. If I want to start at weakest, okay, New Zealand dollar and the pound are probably toggling back and forth between being the weakest. Let's say we're probably looking at that. Oh, and I do want to mention, gang, we're going to be here together for about 45 minutes. Today I'm presenting first in the conference, so we'll be together for about 45 minutes. I didn't want to cancel it all together. I don't like when the room is dark, but if you do have questions, get them in early, because we have about another, half an hour together. Okay. All right, so again, taking a look at and by the way, how is this new mic, gang? My mobile mic is another USB mic that probably isn't anywhere near the quality of this one. Do you notice a better sound quality? I'm big on the sound. I don't have a pop filter, though. So if I start popping, I don't have a pop filter in this one. By the time we did the afternoon breakout session yesterday, my other microphone had actually broke. It was just hanging on literally by a wire. So that was unacceptable. All right, so just making sure. Okay, excellent. Thanks for the feedback. So if we're talking about the weakest story being the New Zealand dollar and the hot zone and the Aussie affecting the New Zealand dollar, so definitely an Aussie RBA hot zone. Again, I call it a sympathetic reaction. We definitely had that going on yesterday. And what are our favorite New Zealand dollar sells against the yen, euro, and US dollar? Now, not necessarily in that order. A lot of that's going to depend on whether I want to sell the New Zealand dollar against the euro or the US or the yen is going to have a lot to do with what's going on this chart. Are we going to break out or break down out of this pattern here on the euro US? What's going on this chart, the dollar index? Now, as we go into tomorrow, as we start to tackle the rest of this week, we do have global dairy today. So you want to talk about another impact on the New Zealand dollar, global dairy. You want to talk about yet another impact on the New Zealand dollar. Take a look at an unemployment rate and the employment change. Then 2 hours later, Governor Wheeler's going to be speaking. Then we have Aussie data. So Aussie and New Zealand dollar are very much in play. If you want to look at a hot zone based ICS, we're talking about New Zealand dollar today. We're talking about Australian dollar today. And then what individual currencies against the Aussie and against the Kiwi do we want to? And I think we want to sell Aussie now. So I think it's going to be a very similar set of currencies. Again, yen and euro and US dollar. We want to buy those stories while we sell the Aussie and the Kiwi. So I think we're really starting to look at, once again, a good amount of calm dollar weakness, but probably the Canadian dollar is probably the strongest of the three, which is really pretty crazy, actually, which is actually really crazy when you consider what the crude oil market continues to do. Now, I don't think 2 days lower through price action we've already been in necessarily is that much of an attention getter. We need to punch down lower lows before we start to see some bearish mojo out of this market. But for me, I look at what happened at the resistance level, the 34 EMA on the low, and that's a sell. That coincided, and take a look. This sell triggered initially on the 28th. You see that? So that was the 28th. And go back to the Dow. And you'll see, here's the 28th right there. So some of you that are wondering, I don't look at this as leading and lagging at all. Crude oil just happened to reach its resistance and its short sell before the Dow did. And I think the Dow may have otherwise found resistance around the 13 BTG had it not been for a little event called the BOJ right there, that big candle, as you can see on the 29th. So looking at the way the crude oil market and the Dow are moving lower, one of the pairs that ends up on my radar, although it's not the weakest, Comdol. If I'm looking at Comdol ranking, number one weakest is New Zealand dollar. That is the tomato can. 2 is Aussie. 3 is Loonie. So when I take a look at what we have going on in Canadian dollar, Japanese yen, we talked about this yesterday. This is absolutely crude versus Dow. Well, and it shouldn't even be a versus scenario. It's really a crude and Dow conversation. If crude weakens, we get the Canadian dollar weakening. That's movement to the downside. If the Dow weakens, we see the yen strengthening. That also takes us to the downside. So both those events, both that kind of price action takes us lower. Definitely takes us lower. So overall, I think we have a number of stories that we're interested in longer term. Let's go take a look at the heat map, shall we? See, Debbie mentions, let me head on over to the chat window here. So again, anytime we have an Aussie hot zone, especially conversations that could echo into New Zealand, take a look at that sympathetic reaction. Maybe not that dissimilar to what happens sometimes in the U.S., but I think not as often, but you often do see that kind of reaction in the U.S. with the Canadian dollar and the Canadian economy, actually. All right, so next conversation here. So is Aussie neutral to weak or new tomato can? Debbie, I think the RBA, and we were very uncertain about what to do with the Aussie. There wasn't a lot of clarity. There were not setups. I think we're going to start to treat this as more, rather than neutral to weak, I think we're going to start talking about weak. Not the weakest, but definitely weak. It's sandwiched between the weakness of the Kiwi and the Canada. So yeah, I would say we want to commit to weakness. But of course, we want to focus on the contrasts. And as long as we do that, if we're a little off about the degree to which it's weakened, it's not necessarily going to destroy the trade, right? So let's talk about our heat map. Going back 1 month, as you can see, what continues to be the best contrast? Euro is actually hanging in there pretty well. You know that the closer we get to March, the more hesitant I'm going to be about Euro buys. I do think Euro buys and US dollar buys can coexist. In other words, we can be long greenback and Euro as long as we're long both against weakness stories like, you guessed it, the pound, the Aussie, the Canadian dollar, the New Zealand dollar. And in terms of weakness stories, it's New Zealand pound. Well, let's take a look. Let's rank them together. So in terms of weakness stories, what's number one? New Zealand dollar. Right now, we're actually talking number 3 would be pound. Very interesting. So, I've been kind of looking at pound then Aussie, but we might find that those two are toggling back and forth. We might see pound the next week is then Aussie or vice versa. Right now, I think after yesterday's sell-off in the Aussie, we're seeing the Aussie as the next week as currency. In fact, if we go out to the one-day relative performance in FinViz, so go to finviz.com, click on the Forex link, then on performance, and I think you'll notice, you would think the Aussie would be the weakest today. No. The Kiwi is taking it on the chin. And that's exactly the kind of price action that we would like to see. Right? We've been wanting to take advantage of that weakness. Right? Okay. So I saw a list of pairs. Hang on. Question. So Euro Kiwi. Yeah, Euro Kiwi has great contrast then, doesn't it? Not only for, I think an overall longer conversation, John, but also for what? A 5-minute BTG conversation. For those of you that want to stay nimble in short term, buying Euro today, buying Yen today makes a lot of sense against what? So look for your contrast there on the 5-minute time frame. Okay, so Debbie says Aussie US, Euro Kiwi, New Zealand dollar US. Those are all excellent contrasts in terms of maybe not day trading today. Euro New Zealand would work, right? So of those three, and I know you didn't mean it necessarily as day trades, but I'm just going to mention it to those of you that like shorter term time frames. Yes, so absolutely, we can look at Euro New Zealand as a day trading candidate. Longer term, we could look at it as a longer term swing trading candidate. So, right now, okay, the BTGs, 5-minute day trades, and they don't necessarily have to be BTGs, but 5-minute day trades are buy Euro, buy Yen, sell Aussie, sell Canada, sell Kiwi. And then longer term, buy Euro, sell Kiwi works. Buy Euro, sell Aussie works. Buy Euro, sell Pound. Buy Euro, sell Canada. Even though US dollar and Japanese yen are below the Euro, realize there are 4 other names that would come before I look for a Euro Aussie or Euro Yen Euro buy. I'm not saying you can't do it. It just makes the least amount of sense when you look at the longer term contrast, right? Now, depending upon what end of the range, say the Euro US dollar is at, sure, we could talk about playing the range, but overall, if I want to buy Euro, my best bet is not Euro. Actually, Euro US is the worst, and yet that is where most people will pile in to express their opinion about what they think the Euro is going to do. If you're a Euro bull, you want to buy Euro, you do so against the Canadian dollar, Pound, Aussie, Kiwi. But if you're a Euro bear, if you want to start setting up longer term Euro weakness positions, then you turn that list around and you say the best Euro sells are where there's the least amount of contrast. So Euro US, Euro Yen comes into play there. But Debbie, I like your list. Take a look. New Zealand dollar US, solid contrast. Euro New Zealand, excellent. The best, actually, contrast. It's the best New Zealand dollar short. It's the best Euro buy. And that always is not getting those setups from both perspectives doesn't always work. The Euro New Zealand is in, I won't say an extremely unique scenario, but it's the best of both. It's the best of both ICS, and that isn't always the case. So is the New Zealand dollar Japanese yen still valid? Let's jump in and talk about that. New Zealand dollar Japanese yen. So realize that after yesterday's move higher, we did flirt with, obviously, validity for the trend. So what this ends up being is more of a distribution fade. But you could actually, you're going to lose. Look, what have you lost by shorting down here around 78.30? Probably about 70 pips, right? So then my question becomes, can we go to a 240? Can we go to a 480? Heck, can we go to a 60 and try to find a 4 to 6? Can you go 60? Can you go 30? Can you go 5, 15 or 5? Can you find a more nimble time frame to go short? I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Maybe, since we are in chop, be a little bit more discerning about the trade. I like the trade. I like the contrast. But we're very much what? We're very much Dow dependent here, aren't we? We're very much Dow dependent. So if this yen trade is going to work, I think the New Zealand dollar weakness is certainly helping. Obviously, the weakest currency today in the one-day relative performance. But I also want to keep in mind that without some yen strength, we may see the New Zealand dollar not necessarily be as weak a player and be the main driver here. I think both these stories could be drivers. Let me just make sure I say that. I think both these stories could be drivers. And we definitely want to see that the Dow continues lower to keep the strength, keep the bid on the yen. And this is exactly what we've been waiting for. I don't know how many of you join me in the Dow short. How many of you are short Dow right now? So Matt, yeah, I think we could look for shorts. Just look to other time frames. 30 might be good, a 30-minute trend follow. The daily is more of a fade, but if you still want to treat it a bit like a swing, that's fine. It's not ideal. It's not necessarily from a market trend standpoint valid, but I think it's still a good trade in terms of wanting to buy yen on a risk-off day and sell the other weakest currency out there. If we don't want to go, you can ask yourself also, where's Aussie versus yen? Do we have better set up somewhere in Aussie yen, a pound versus yen? So it doesn't have to be a Kiwi story. What's your driver? If it's Kiwi, then yeah, Kiwi yen looks great. Euro versus Kiwi looks great too. I am more curious whether the U.S. dollar is the weakness or strength story, says Theon. All right, well, let's take a peek here. All right, so if we want to know about the U.S. dollar and comparing that to other individual currency stories, well, first of all, you can go right to FinViz. You can go right to FinViz. This is a one-day relative performance to the U.S. dollar. So if I do a 1 month, if I go to a 1 month, what do we see? It's the second strongest individual currency story. So I definitely don't want to commit to euro shorts. I don't believe in them. You guys know I've been harping on that for a very long time. I don't believe in U.S. dollar shorts. I'm actually more comfortable with euro shorts. I do not believe in U.S. dollar shorts. There's very few places it makes sense. Really, only time we can take advantage of it, only place would be euro or yen on the other side of that U.S. dollar short. So I would also mention we have non-farm payroll on Friday. The countdown for non-farm payroll starts tomorrow with the ADP release. That's when we kind of officially go into NFP psychology, isn't it? So keeping that in mind might be worth keeping some powder dry and looking for a catch the wick into non-farm payroll. So where is the U.S. dollar the weakness and or strength story? No weakness story for the dollar, but strength story? Well, let's go back to the contrasts. What's the story there? What are the contrasts? buy US, sell pound Aussie. Well, actually, you would sell Canada, pound, Aussie, Kiwi. Your top three. Pound, Aussie, Kiwi. And pound's number 3, Aussie's number 2, Kiwi's number 1. So we're talking about these 3 pairs. So then you go back into the dailies and you ask yourself, where is the clarity? Pound US, 4 to 6 o'clock. Aussie US, not as good yet, right? The Aussie might be coming on. Now, we've been talking about weekly shorts using options on AD futures for a long time, and that's something that you can continue to look for on weekly corrections. But pound US, New Zealand dollar US, and then Aussie US. So in terms of US dollar buys, number 1 is pound versus US. Number 2, New Zealand dollar. Number 3, and since it just really got clarified as a weakness story, is the Aussie. And just for good measure, what about US dollar, Canadian dollar? Where is it? It's kind of number 4 because I like the crude oil weakness story, but Canada is difficult here because officially there's no DB. But when you look at crude oil, there's DB in crude, which is kind of what we're trying to take advantage of. Does this make, where's the best Canadian dollar short, by the way? I don't know that we have one. I actually don't know that we have one. It might be actually even EWC. We might actually go out to the iShare there. I know that's not a Forex market, but it is related, isn't it? It is related. Could we get a catch the week on global dairy? The global dairy story today would have to be really pretty darn good to so global dairy info results. It would have to be pretty darn good to give us a reprieve on the New Zealand dollar weakness that we could then sell into. Would I be willing to sell into? New Zealand dollar strength. We need a reprieve in global dairy to get some New Zealand dollar strength that I would look to then sell into. That's really what I want to do. I want to sell into any New Zealand dollar strength. Are we going to get that opportunity? We can see what happens with NFP. We can see what happens with global dairy, but I'm not suspecting that it will. In fact, I think that we may have to start thinking a little bit more aggressively, perhaps, about New Zealand dollar shorts, because I think one of the narratives that's going to come into March, along with the Euro narrative on the central bank story, is possibly an RBNZ rate cut. I think there's a reason the New Zealand dollar is the weakest right now without lower lows in global dairy. China, sure, that started the ball rolling, but I think now we're talking about possibly looking at a rate cut. Okay. On New Zealand dollar, Japanese yen, where would I want to play? Well, we don't have an opportunity at either one of these right now. New Zealand dollar, Japanese yen will be in play on non-farm payroll because the yen will be in play. You can go, like I said, 60 or 30 minute and look for an opportunity more short term. 78.50, 78.45. Debbie, 30 minute New Zealand. If you're looking for taking advantage of that yen strength, New Zealand dollar weakness today, right? I'm taking advantage of New Zealand dollar, Japanese yen. You can go to a 30-minute chart and look for a 78.45, that area swing, 78.60 65 to 85 could be your stop loss. And then your downside target is probably going to be 78.20, 78.25 for your first profit target. And I know that sounds like, wow, that's all. But remember, this is a 30-minute time frame. It's a 30-minute. So, I'm talking about risking 30 pips to make about, what, 30? I could be risking 15 to 78.65 to make about 30. So then the other question is this working with the underlying price movement ranges? Does this even make sense to put this trade on in terms of the price movement ranges? So let's go on over to Auto Chartist. I'm not logged in there yet. And gang, we're going to wrap up here shortly. I'm going to be presenting here. I got to get out of the room and actually I got to check out of the room and make my way down to the convention area. So I'll be wrapping up here probably in just a few minutes, okay? But I'll be back in the office tonight and take a look here. New Zealand dollar, Japanese yen. So we're looking at, let's say you want to look at the 30-minute, and I'm talking about 25, 30 pips. You can see that's probably a little bit on the lower end, but it's not horribly off, is it? As far as price movement expectations, when you dial down to the hourly. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit more, it's a little tighter than it probably ideally would be, but it's close enough. So the question is, am I still in New Zealand dollar, Japanese yen? I do have a smaller position. Mike, yeah. When we popped up through, we made a high here yesterday. Right there. When we popped up through 79, I did lighten my load, which is to say I just realized I took some losses. I took some medicine on some of my position. I think I took a third of my position off. So I still have the same position on, just with smaller size. Sometimes rather than stopping myself out, remember, we can limit risk with what? Price, where our stop loss is located, and size. Yeah, so I'm still in, just with smaller size. I went ahead and took a little bit of risk off the table in case I'm going to be wronger. How's that for butchering the language? In case I was going to be wronger. And then I went ahead and said, okay, what's the easiest way for me to, rather than stopping myself out, what's the other variable I could basically use to limit my downside? Smaller size. Smaller size. All right, so let's see what else we have here. Take a peek at the US dollar. Nowhere. Crude setting lower. Love it. And by the way, I'm not excited about a measly 100 points or so lower on the Dow, and I'm not impressed with the lack of getting through 16.2. Okay, we're down 140. I want to break 16.2. That's the play that I'm looking for, is for this market to get closer to 16 even. Yeah, no, I'm not taking any prisoners here. Not one bit.